Hello all, I noticed head of the Met, that's the London police force for any people outside of the UK, has been speaking to The Guardian about how it's shameful that black boys in London are more likely to die by 18 than white boys. Now, this is something of a rite of passage for leaders of the Met Police. They have to play this harmless, loving mother act to appease The Guardian and the BBC, and certainly not to make the black lads angry in any way. And that role is the exact opposite of his job. He's supposed to be a strong, masculine figure implementing order in a chaotic city. But never mind, let's cut to the chase of this video, which is, why does he say that it's shameful? Who's supposed to feel that shame? That's the implication. Well, of course, the people that are supposed to feel the shame are the Met, and by extension, you. After all, we all know how progressivism works in this day and age. The core issue is always, supposedly, the underlying white privilege structure that abuses minorities, both past and present, especially black folks, and the solution is to be more conscious, more compassionate, more woke. Yet I'm sure, as many of you have noticed, despite London doubling down on the gay race communism every single year, it never seems to make a difference to the actual outcomes when it comes to the violence and the decay in London. And while this is horrible for many of us to watch our beloved capital die in real time, there is a silver lining to all of this. And that is, the line that we're given by the liberal mainstream isn't mapping onto reality very well at all. While the Owen Jones types, they will hammer this because really for them it's an ego position. I'm a better person than you because I can see injustice and I'm so empathetic and open-minded. In reality, anybody who's seriously thinking about what's going on can now tell that the way we're approaching this is just full of utopian liberal ideology that's not really reflecting the harsh reality. So what is really happening? To understand this, we can look at what Mark Rowley himself actually said, and it's worth remembering before we go into this that Mark Rowley is the same as any managerial type in the liberal regime, whether it's the leader of the Met, the Archbishop of Canterbury, or the Prime Minister himself. Their real job is simply to replicate and repeat the ideological narrative of the liberal regime, and they'll stay in power. So let's look at what Rowley actually said in reference to the history between police and the black community. Quote, where policing has got a lot wrong and we get a lot more right today, we still do make mistakes. That's not in doubt. I'm being as relentless in that as it can be. The vast majority of our people are good people, but that legacy combined with the tragedy that some of this crime falls most heavily in black communities, that creates a real problem because the legacy creates concern. Now remember, the point of this article is supposedly why young black lads die at higher rates than white. Yet here he's talking about police brutality in the past. But the reality is that the police aren't the ones killing these black kids. And secondly, ironically, while trying to show he's going to address the root causes of this, he shows he's afraid to address the root causes. Look at the second paragraph in the middle where it reads, the tragedy that some of this crime falls most heavily in black communities. What does he mean that crime just falls in that community? Like, the rain just falls in a certain location. There are reasons why crime is so bad in certain communities, and this shows he's completely unserious when it comes to his next quote. I'm so determined, Rowley states, to find a way to get past this, because if policing in black communities can find a way to confront these issues, together we can give black boys growing up in London equal life chances to white boys, which is not what we're seeing at the moment. So the implication is, if the police just act nicey nice towards black youths, don't implement stop and search, try not to be mean to them, and maybe don't arrest them if they get caught stealing or whatever, this will magically fix itself and black kids won't stab each other anymore. Yet as those of us who've lived in London will know, and I did for 10 years, the Met has always spoken this way. This is nothing new from Mark Rowley. It's always, it's the institution's fault, we need to be more nice, more understanding, more soft, and it will magically fix itself. But in reality, things have just got worse and worse and worse, so I think it's time to look at some harsh truths. Just before I do, a quick side note. I don't know if you ever go on the Guardian website, why would you? But they're always begging for money. Their site is full of adverts and they still want money from you. These people are supposed to be socialists, aren't they? Drives me nuts. But anyway, let's challenge some of the sacred cows that underpin the ideological narrative of people like Mark Rowley. First of all, we're supposed to be gammons, stupid, mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging little Englanders who can't see outside our own town. Yet, stupid bigots that we supposedly are, we have found that these problems tend to transcend borders. You find the same problems with black youths killing each other en masse in America, France, Canada. The list goes on, pretty much every country in the Western world. Now, if we're to extrapolate this, we also see Africa is home to some of the most violent countries on earth as well. And what does all of this tell us? Well, according to the mainstream, all of this, everything included, is simply a result of white privilege and colonialism. The general line is that colonialism was the ultimate cruelty expressed by ravenous Europeans, and any group would act in this same way had it been oppressed by another group for so long, and even in the present day as well. Now, as I've pointed out before on the channel, I don't think you can blame the Europeans for rising up and dominating. It was a world of kill or be killed. I mean, what were we supposed to do? Just bend over and get our bodies spanked by Islam? We seem to have waited to the 21st century to do that willingly anyway, for some reason. Yet before the mass cooking of the Europeans, we did live in a very different world. In the Age of Empire, there's no doubt many sins were committed, sins that we've taken ownership for. Anyone in a role of leadership will commit sins. It's about whether they face them or not. And the real question is, did the British Empire leave the world a better or a worse place? I mean, one of the main accusations is, it was genocides caused in India and Africa. But look at the population booms in both of those arenas. Look at the technology, the advancements in medicine, healthcare, politics. We have completely changed the world for the better, in my view. We should remember as well, the world before the British Empire and other European empires wasn't exactly a land of honey and magic and rainbows and fairies. It was a brutal and savage world. Yet none of this suits the ideological narrative of leftist liberalism, and it doesn't get the sexy marketing that the countercase does from Hollywood and so on, and even on the roots level in the black communities, the supposedly conscious rap. In fact, you get lots of white middle class types that like this sort of thing. They gravitate from 50 Cent and the Wu-Tang Clan to listen to, Akala and Talib Kweli, the intellectual rap, which is basically just sort of leftism blended with hip-hop and Pan-Africanism. Now, collectively, this is quite a powerful cultural force. You have Hollywood, which tugs on the heartstrings of the liberal boomers and the women, and the rap is very good for the young Western youth to buy into the same ideology, really, from the other way around. But of course, the big question behind all of this is the harsh truth that many other groups have faced exactly what black folks have, sometimes worse. In fact, all groups have faced brutality in the past, yet their outcomes are consistently different. Now, when you will get the liberal mainstream to address the issue of different outcomes, people will speak about culture as being the main culprit. But that, of course, begs, well, where does a culture come from, and how do you even change it anyway? And even if you wanted to change that culture anyway, what can you do? Take away gangster rap music? Can you imagine the response if you tried to do that? How racist that would seem. The black community itself would be like, they're trying to silence us, yo. And the Guardianistas and the BBC with their, like Killer Chogger D and Big Merv the Dirty Perv, they need their expression, to talk about, degeneracy. Come on. The only element of the culture that is probably relevant that you're not allowed to talk about is fatherless families in the black community. I mean, it's obvious, it's well attested. If kids grow up without strong father figures, they're more likely to be anxious or aggressive, and that can lead them into a world of gangs and violence. But of course, that's not feminist. You don't need no man in this day and age. What are you, a bigot? On top of that, it paints blacks as responsible for their own outcomes, which isn't allowed either. There's also the more niche conservative criticism, which is black folks have forgotten God. They're not religious anymore. But again, to me, this just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. If anyone's forgotten God, it's the Europeans. And if you do go to churches in London, which, I used to, you find that many of them are propped up by African congregations, many Jamaican congregations as well. In conclusion, all of this is pointing towards some very controversial and harsh truths that, let's be honest, the liberal system is never really going to face. So instead it just reverts back to the same old claim of it's just always institutional racism that leads to these outcomes. And then it just turns to a rinse and repeat as we have done for the past 30 or 40 years. All we have to do is say this is down to institutional racism on the part of the police, and if you want to look at the meta angle, it's the result of colonialism and so on. Yet the problem with this approach is that nothing changes. ever. In fact, things just get worse when we take this approach. And as Britain declines, more and more people are starting to think, what's going on here? We're supposed to believe that this police force that prances around like a coked up 21-year-old gay at a pride march is somehow extremely brutally cruel to black folks. You know, when the pride march is over, they say, how can we oppress blacks this week? I mean, it's not impossible that the police are all secretly white supremacist, evil, racist bigots, but look, here's one of them dancing to Pakistan's Independence Day. I mean, they don't seem racist, they seem the opposite of that. I mean, after all, the very core of this video is about the head of the Met being caught up in an anti-racist ideology himself. Remember, anti-racist doesn't mean anti-racist, it means pro-utopian liberal ideology. Yet the meta point of all of this is that this is another example of the utopian liberal delusional worldview starting to crumble as it bashes its head against the brick wall of reality. Sure, if you're affluent enough and you can live in an enclave in the Shires, you can still believe all of these wonderful utopian ideals. You know, think you're better, more conscious, more connected with your heart than those cruel, knuckle-dragging gammon bigots. The reality is, though, as things get worse and worse and less of people can afford to hold these views, the liberal delusion is falling apart, and it means we either have to face some very harsh truths or we will ultimately crumble ourselves. As always, these are just my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new.